Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am very happy to be with you again, especially after the technical difficulties I had to get into this recording today. I don't know what is going on in the universe, but the computer screen behind me is not working. My computer was having issues. It's just one of those days. I hope that your day is off to a better start. I do have a great interview with another author for you today. As we get started, I want to remind you, as always, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening or watching this video on, this episode on. You can also support the podcast by going to gsmcpodcast.info and leaving a tip or a donation. That is really helpful to not only my podcast, but to the network as a whole. When you're there, if you want to leave a comment or a question for me to engage with, I would be happy to do so. I'll do that at the beginning of the next episode after receiving those questions or comments. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.info if you want to support the podcast in a monetary way by leaving a tip or a donation. As we get started, I mentioned that I hope that your day is not technically or technologically challenged as my last little bit has been. It is also, it's gotten hot here. We haven't been too bad. I've been looking at temps in the US and thinking that they've looked bad. Well, and I don't even think it's that hot here today. It just feels hot. Today, the lack of air conditioning is getting to me. So I've got like sweaty hair and it's the lack of air conditioning and the lack of ice. Most of the time, it doesn't bother me. And yes, I do have a freezer. I could make my own ice, but it's a very teeny tiny freezer. It does not have room for ice cube trays and food. We could get an ice maker to sit on the countertop, but we don't have that much of counter space, and there aren't that many outlets. So it's a challenge. It's not that much of a challenge most of the time. It's just today I'm feeling very warm today. Warmish and sweatish, as I think, is that from the Junie B. Jones books? She always said she was hottish and sweatish, maybe? I don't know. I could be misquoting that, but I just remember my sister reading the something along those lines to my nieces when she was reading, I think, Junie B. Jones to them. What do I know? Let's talk about not that children's book, but a different children's book today. I'm very excited. As you know, we've been doing a lot of thrillers the last few weeks. That's been great. No issues there, but it's lovely to have a change of pace, and we have that this week. I am speaking today with Kalee Boisvert about her book, MoneyWise Mabel's Bursting Bank. It is a children's book. Let me give you the description of it. What should Mabel do now that her piggy bank is full to the brim? Buy lots of candy? Spend it all on that toy she's been eyeing? Finally get that unicorn sprinkler that sprays water from its horn? That's my vote, if you're wondering. But when Mabel pulls her piggy bank out from under the bed, it's stuffed. She can't fit one more coin inside. Piggy is bursting. What should Mabel do with all that money? Buy candy? Toys? Games? Mabel's so excited that her bed becomes a trampoline and she wants to spend it all. But then her mother explains that money doesn't have to burn a hole in your pocket, a lesson that sends Mabel on a journey to learn what it means to become money-wise. Follow her as she takes her first steps to independence by opening a bank account. Teach your school-aged kids fundamentals about money management that is approachable, fun, and charming, a debut from Kalee Boisvert. With this approachable, fun, and charming debut from Kalee Boisvert, full of colorful illustrations and easy-to-understand concepts. So, a few stumbles there. I apologize. Not sure. I think the heat. That's what we'll say. We'll say the heat has fried my brain. I'm gonna cool it off. I've got plenty of water. I just need to hydrate. So today is MoneyWise Mabel's Bursting Bank. I'm speaking with Kalee, and again, delighted to be talking about a children's book, delighted to just have a change of pace. But I do love children's books, as you know, and this one is not only fun, it does teach some very basic, valuable lessons about money. You know, what do we do when we have that piggy bank that can't fit one more single coin into it? And yeah, it is tempting. Even as adults, it's tempting to just go spend that on something really, really cool, right? But Mabel gets to learn about how the bank works, and she gets to go to the bank and learn what happens to her money when she takes it to the bank, and how it can earn interest, etc. And it's exciting when you're little. We talk a little bit in the the interview about both of our experiences with money growing up and how learning about it can be exciting and fun. And money isn't something that we always talk about in families. That can be a taboo subject. So this is a fun and approachable way to maybe start having that conversation, especially if previous generations didn't talk about it in your family. This is a good way to, like I said, start that conversation. So speaking of conversation, let's go ahead and get into that conversation with Kalee. Again, the book is MoneyWise Mabel's Bursting Bank. The author is Kalee Boisvert, and let's go ahead and start that interview. Hi, Kalee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk about a children's book. We're going to talk about your book, MoneyWise Mabel's Bursting Bank. Love the alliteration first. Before we do that, though, before we talk about the book, can you take just a minute to share a little bit about yourself so my listeners can get to know you a bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the book is a kid's book about money, and it just so happens that I grew up being very fascinated by money at an early age. So I just so happened to be a numbers person, and I was very intrigued by money early on. So growing up, I was raised by a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. And so the messaging that was kind of constantly being received when I would ask for something, it would be like, no, we can't afford that. We don't have enough money. And that was kind of over and over again what I was hearing. And then it was funny because then at one moment, which I feel like was kind of the moment that I remember most, because it was like what changed everything, I think, for me. But it was when I was like begging my mom for a Super Nintendo gaming system because I wanted one so bad. My best friend had one. And instead of the usual, like, no, we can't afford that. I'm not buying that. We don't have enough money. She said to me, well, if you want it so badly, why don't you just buy it yourself? Like, save up your money and buy it yourself. And I was like, what? My whole mind was like, I can do this. I can get it myself. Because as a young person, it's almost like you don't feel necessarily like you have that power or something. And then always hearing that messaging of like, we can't have that. I can't afford that. It was this like aha moment, and it was so exciting. And from that moment on, I like diligently saved my money. I think it took me close to a year, and I saved up for that Super Nintendo, and I bought it myself. And it was the most amazing feeling. And it's like ever since then, it's been all about, how can I help other people get that feeling, and help people with their finances and with their money. And so now, as an adult in my career, I am a financial professional. I'm a financial advisor, and I work with people to do just that, like walk beside them, help them achieve their biggest financial goals, and assist them along the way. And I love it. And I think it goes right back to that early memory of like how I think it's possible for everyone, and how we kind of forget about the possibilities. And when we're young, it's almost like a nice reminder of remembering that anything is possible. So
Okay.
that's kind of my story and how it relates to this book too.
Okay. Well, as I said, it's MoneyWise Mabel's Bursting Bank, and you've given a little bit of the inspiration for the story with your experience, but can you give just a brief overview of the story?
Yeah. Yeah. So the book is MoneyWise Mabel's Bursting Bank, and it's about Mabel, the main character, and she fills up her piggy bank, and she's so excited. And of course, her first thought is like buying, candy and just all those junky things that kids love to waste money on. And, then as she's like sharing this with her mom, this good news of filling up her piggy bank, her mom's like, well, you don't have to, spend it all right away. Like money doesn't have to burn a hole in your pocket. You can save it up for something bigger. And then again, that kind of is her aha moment of like, wow, I can do even more than this. And then she learns and goes on this journey about like opening a bank account and learns what interest is. And it's just this fun journey of a little girl learning about money. Again, because I think for me, learning about money early on was such a game changer. Again, like growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, and seeing that, but then knowing that that didn't have to be my reality, and my world is very different than that now in my life, and I'm so proud of that. But I want that for all kids to know that like maybe you are growing up in a household where you don't have a lot of money and things like that, but that doesn't change that you could create your own journey, and that it can be something different. That we don't have to be like this cycle of poverty. It's not this thing that has to continue on. And so that's this Mabel book is based on that. And Mabel's book is, yeah, based on that story. And And of course, I don't think we talk about these topics enough and we don't learn about it enough. Like if we're acknowledging kind of, you know, what we learn in schools when we're young and throughout our education, a lot of people say, we didn't learn things about money, and it's such an important skill. It's a life skill, and we don't learn it. So that was really that inspiration for Mabel. It was like my own experience, but then knowing that kids were really getting enough of this along the way, it was like, what can I do? What can I do to help kids feel this inspiration and feel good about finances and start the conversation? Because the idea really started when COVID hit, and my daughter, she was in kindergarten. And so, of course, parents had to become the teachers when it first happened. And, bless teachers, they do an amazing job. And I think all parents can acknowledge it was a really hard time.
Yeah.
And just one thing that kind of like stood out for me is like, as we're teaching them, there wasn't anything on money. And I'm not blaming the teachers at all because they're delivering the curriculum that they're supposed to do. But it was just like that's that missing piece. And so that was where, the whole idea started, of just that financial literacy piece that I think we're lacking, and how my experience was so positive with money, and how we can kind of blend that and help kids feel inspired and confident with money.
Yeah. I had a similar-ish experience. The book made me remember when my parents had savings accounts for all of their children, of the three of us. And I remember when I was old enough to kind of realize that there was a bank statement each month, and I wanted to see my bank statement, and I looked, and for the quarter, I'd gotten 3 cents in interest. And I was so offended. And I was like, why did I only get 3 cents? And my mom explained it to me, and, well, there's only this much money in there. And so from then on, I was determined I was going to put money in that savings account, because darn it, I wanted more than 3 cents interest.
Yes. And that's so cool. Like that you still have that memory, and it is so vivid. Like there's so much of what we learn about finances and money that happens early on. And it's just that reminder of like, we can make it a very positive experience. So we can set up the future generations to have a really good, positive relationship with money.
Yeah. I mentioned at the beginning that this is a really important conversation, and it is sometimes a hard one to have with, if you didn't grow up in a family that talked about money. And I mentioned that because Kalee talks about it, obviously, in the interview, as she was just doing. And so it's wonderful to have a resource, a place to start having those conversations. If it's not something you grew up with, if it's not something that you are maybe comfortable talking about, money and how we spend it, etc., this is a good jumping off point. So we are going to take our first break of this episode. When we come back, Kalee will be talking about what she hopes readers and their grown-ups might take away from the book. So you are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Kalee Boisvert. As we get back into segment 2, I just want to remind you that if you want to support the podcast and the network in another way, in addition to all of the ways that you support it that are greatly appreciated, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info and leave a tip or a donation. Again, that helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. That link is next to me. It is gsmcpodcast.info. And thank you, as always, for all of your support. So before the break, Kalee was talking about how important this conversation is to have with people of all ages in terms of money and money management and how we spend money. So let's go ahead and return now to the conversation with Kalee. And is that positive experience and relationship with money what you're hoping that readers and the adults that read with them are going to take away from the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I just want it to be fun, like money conversation to be a fun, open piece of communication. Like it's this taboo topic sometimes of like, don't ask what people make or how much something costs or and it's like, why? Like, why have we, it's almost like we've just made it into that in our society. And I think that's very like North American society I speak of and speak from. But I think other countries, that's not necessarily the case. And it's just, it doesn't have to be taboo. Like I want it to be an open conversation for everyone. If parents are thinking like money is a huge source of stress right now for, adults and people like day-to-day life, everything's very expensive right now. And that's causing a lot of stress. And a lot of parents, I hear them talking about like when they have kids, they're very worried for their children. They're like, how are they ever going to buy a house? What are they ever, how are they going to pay for anything? And it's parents are taking on that stress already of their children who aren't even of age to buy a house. And it's just like, well, here's one thing you can do, like have these conversations with your kids early on. It's like, it's empowering them and teaching them the skills so that they can do the things they need to do to make those possible. Like it doesn't all have to fall on us as parents. We have to remember that kids are very resourceful and if we can empower them and we give them this opportunity, like let's see what they can do as well. Don't think that it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to buy their first house or something like that. I think it's funny that that's like the go-to of like, well, why don't we teach them? And that's probably even better, something that they can take through life and they'd really appreciate that. So I think that's what I really hope like parents see from the book and kids, that they just have fun and start talking about money and asking questions. Parents that have read the book to their kids give me feedback of what their kids have said. And I love it. Like they said, like one was like, oh, my daughter's saving up for her own iPad now, or my son's saving up for snorkeling gear. And it's just so cute. I'm like, oh, I love kids with money. Like they're just adorable. And I don't think we give kids enough, like, I don't know, this like whole empowerment. And they can do a lot too. Like it's like we think we got to do everything for them. But it just makes me so happy. Like it just it's my money. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, oh, kids and their money. And it's just adorable. I love it.
What age group do you think resonates best for the book?
Yeah, I think it's great for ages like 4 to 7, I guess, like reading them. But I mean, people have read it to younger too, like 3-year-olds and stuff, or when people have like new babies, I send it to them. No time like the present to start talking about money. And it's just, again, if it's the concepts are over their head, eventually it's going to like be, a concept that they want to talk about or ask questions about, if anything. So yeah, it's a picture book. So it's great for kind of 4 to 7-year-olds, I would say.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the pictures. So, you write the story, you maybe have images in your own head. The illustrator, let me double check, Val Lawton. How was that relationship with the illustrator? And did you have much input, or how did that work?
Yeah, it was great. It was like, I so believe in the kind of power of the universal forces when you have, an idea in motion. And so I had the idea for the book. And then, of course, I'm like, well, I can't draw the pictures. I'm not that artsy. So I'm thinking, who am I going to get to illustrate? And I'm like, oh, there's this woman I met at this through my coaching. And she had written a kid's book. And I'm like, I remember it. I have it. And I go grab it. I'm like, that's who I needed to be. And I reach out to Val and I'm like, this is the concept. And I kind of send her all this stuff and we just get working together. And it's like right off the bat, like I didn't even have to say, what I was visually seeing. It was like she knew, she read my mind. It was the easiest process of anything I've ever experienced. I'm like, man, you just got to listen to those signs because they're kind of guiding you and directing you. I'm like, that was easy. So it was amazing. I think when you find a good creative person or whatever it was, or a good fit, it's like, takes the work out of it. And it's just like she visually saw exactly what I wanted it to look like. And I sent her a picture of my daughter because I'm like, I kind of want to base the character on my daughter Ivy when, it was her like pink clothes in her closet and her love for unicorns and things like that. So she did that as well, which is sweet.
And, you said that Mabel wanted to buy, the crazy things that children want to buy. Now, I take offense on Mabel's behalf because, I'm sorry, a unicorn sprinkler that shoots water out of its horn sounds awesome.
I know. Or the dollhouse. That's what my daughter's dealing with right now. She wants the Barbie dream house. She didn't like Barbies, and now she's all of a sudden started liking them and wants the Barbie dream house. I'm like, well, this is a funny moment for me because I have another book, a nonfiction book called Make Money Your Thing, and I share a story in it about how I wanted more than anything the Barbie dream house. And I wanted that for Christmas and I didn't get it. It's not something my mom could afford, but
Yeah.
it's just like full circle and I don't know what to do now that she's asked for it because I almost want to just buy it for her because like I didn't get it in my childhood, but then
Right.
I'm struggling with like, but that's not teaching her any lessons about, the hard work and the saving up. So now I'm like kind of in my head going through like maybe a hybrid of like if she saves up a certain amount, I'll help her. So I'm struggling because I really like when she said she wanted it, I just wanted to like instantly buy it for her
Yeah.
so badly because that was that one trigger of mine of just like I wanted it so bad.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm trying to think of a way where it's like teaching her those lessons too.
Yeah. I also did not get the Barbie dream house growing up, but I did get the Barbie Corvette. So I thought I was pretty
Yeah,
cool with that, you know?
that's a good one too. I
Yeah.
know there's so many good Barbie
But yeah,
stuff.
that Barbie dream house, I can only imagine it's gotten even more expensive than since I was a kid. So,
Yeah, it's like $200 now.
wow.
So inflation.
Yeah, exactly. When you sat down to write the book, and you wanted a children's book about money, what approach did you take to make it accessible to children? Were you really conscious about vocabulary and those sorts of things, or did you just kind of try to get the idea down first?
Yeah, I started with getting the idea down. And again, funny, like when I wanted to write this, I was saying out loud in my office, I'm like, I'm going to write this book. And the a guy walking by heard me and he's like, well, I went to this networking event. And I met a book coach. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's something I need. So I reached out to her and I'm like, here's the idea. And I had it all written down. She's like, okay. Because it was like me as a financial professional writing a kid's picture book. She's like, so it needs a lot more of like kid stuff and a lot to draw in your audience. Like think about it, you're writing for children. So that was fun because it gets you going more into like your creative, fun, imagination side that you sort of like tuck away when you're in the serious world of business. And so it was so fun. So my writing coach helped me bring that out. And I'm very proud of it. And I think having a child that was around like who I see Mabel's character as, like my daughter was around 5 or 6 at the time, that was helpful too, because you can really get your head in like the space of like what do kids like and how are they talking and what do they want and things
Yeah.
like that. So it all worked out very well.
Yeah. Yeah, and you add little details like Mabel in the bank thinking that the office seemed like a fish tank because you could see through
Yeah.
the windows, and not everyone would think about that unless they had a child that age or they've been around kids that
But
age.
they're always, oh, I love it. It's so fun. They keep you so young. Now I have a 2-year-old. I just couldn't resist having my daughter's now 10 and I have a 2-year-old because I'm like, they're so fun and they keep you young
And
and
they have no
their
filter.
energy. No, they're just so fun. Seeing the world through their eyes. Exactly. It's just so unique and interesting. You're like, wow,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Um, are we going to see more of Mabel? Would you like to write another book with Mabel, or do you want to write another book at all? I guess would be the first question, and then would Mabel
Yeah.
make another appearance?
Yeah, it's a good question and good timing because, again, universally, I just was like thinking about how it was a concept to have a few different money topics, this being one of them, like her learning about a bank account and interest and things like that, saving up her money. And then I had a few other topic ideas. And I remember way back when I was working with my coach and kind of learning it all and stuff, I just like got in front of my computer and typed up another one really quickly that just came to mind. Like it just like spewed out on the pages. And I remember showing to my writing coach and she was like, I don't know what we were working on, but she's like, yeah, not really quite there. So I kind of took it probably in a different way of like very like offensive of like, oh,
Mhm.
it's not good and just sort of tucked it away forever. But I had it saved on my computer and it just dawned on me like literally this week. And so I opened it up again and I read it and I was like, this is actually really good. And so I'm like, I think it just needed, some time or just had to come at a certain time or something. So it just so happens that I've, talked to my writing coach. She's going to help me do just a few edits on it. And I talked to the original illustrator, Val, and she's good to go on another project for Mabel too. So I have Mabel's next journey, which is where she learns about charitable giving and giving and kind of the magic or joy of that, which is like, I read it and I literally like get to tears almost at the end. I was reading it to Ivy because that was my first test of like, I'm going to see how she thinks it is. And then I'm like, man, Ivy, near the end, I get really emotional. She's like, yeah, I saw you getting a little teary-eyed, Mom. And she's like, it's good though. It's good. And so I'm like, okay, so I know it passed the test of kids will like this. And so, yes, I'm so excited. I'm hoping to get it out before Christmas because it would go great with that time of year.
Especially if your 10-year-old likes it, because again, kids are fun and they have no filter, but that 10-year-old age, it starts to be when they really have no filter and they'll just tell you things. Things
it's
are
like
dumb
between like a kid and a teenager years, and you're just like, oh,
yeah, they're not meaning to be mean. They're just blunt.
Exactly, blunt.
But the author I talked to last week, he said something when we were talking about make sure you write it when you have an idea, write it out like you did, and then put it in a drawer for a week, a month, 6 months, however long. That seems to be like
it was years for me. Maybe it's years. Yeah. And then sometimes it's just like the timing or the season you're in or whatever it is, and you're like, oh no, like this is good and it's time now. Maybe it wasn't the right time before. So I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah. You said you had a nonfiction book, and then you've got this. This is for 4 to 7, but it could be for many different ages. Did you ever think about writing for any other age groups?
Yeah, I want to write for teens, like so the concepts of money for teens or young adults, because I think that's like such a pivotal stage. But that too is a tough one. I'm like, I don't have a teenager yet. And I know they have very short attention spans. So I'm trying to think of, yeah, I have the concepts, but I'm like, how do I write it a little bit differently to like appeal to that generation? That's a mystery.
Yeah. So are you thinking nonfiction, fiction?
Yeah, probably nonfiction. Yeah. And then maybe it is just like be brief for how I deliver it or something like that.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I'll be interested to see if you decide to go that direction, how it turns out, because it is a different age group in this day and age with social media and everything else. So
yeah, like that's usually where they get their information, right? Is like they digest in those 15-second clips or whatnot. And I'm like, so a book is a lot. It's a big endeavor, a nonfiction book for that age group.
Right. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways you could go that would be interesting.
Yeah.
So I wish you luck.
Thank you.
So you grew up, you had the experience with money, you grew up to be in finance. This book came from some very specific set of circumstances, but did you ever think, hey, I may want to write for publication someday, or was it specific to this book? I mean,
I always,
obviously the nonfiction, but
I love books. Like I'm just, I could read books like all day. Like I look at my Kindle and I'm at 40 books for the year. I'm like, wow, that like, and I'm a single mom. I run my own business and I've read 40 books so far. So I'm like, that shows how my little itsy bitsy pieces of time are just spent reading a book. And it's all I would rather do if I have free time. So I've always loved books, like since I was really young. And I remember being, I don't know, kind of like a preteen or something when I was like in my like maybe like Nancy Drew phases and things like that. And just thinking like how amazing it is to write something and put it out there and just like complete strangers are reading your book. Like it just reaches people you would never imagine. And I knew like that I wanted to write something. I'm like, I want to write a book someday. Like to see my book on a like shelf in a bookstore, because I love bookstores. And I'm like, man, that would be the most amazing feeling. So I think it's like I always knew I wanted to. But then the messaging I kept kind of receiving is that I'm just not very good at writing. Like I thought it was almost like a natural ingrained talent that you're born with. There's something almost like genetic. And if you don't got it, you don't got it. And so it was like I would write long stories when I was in elementary, and I could tell like the teachers probably gave up after a few pages. And at the time I took offense, but I'm sure it was like they had a lot of grading to do. And they're like, don't have time for your 40-page story in grade 3, Kalee. But I took it as like, oh, it wasn't good. And So that, and then I was in university and I took an English course and I did horribly. It was like my worst mark in university. And I was like, well, here's the proof I'm not good at writing. And it's just funny how we kind of take these little things in life and they make sometimes like have big meaning and we kind of interpret a really big meaning out of them. And then, yeah, to think that like, because then writing, like meeting Susie, my writing coach, and just she was like, I'm like, this is the idea. This is what I want to do. She's like, okay, let's do it. I was like, oh, like I didn't have to like pass some test or prove to her that I could be a writer. I'm like, this is amazing. I can just write. Just like, yeah. It's okay. So, yeah, it was like a long time dream. And so I like encourage anyone who it's ever like dawned on them, do it. Like just do it. If I can do it, terrible English mark and all that considered, like then absolutely you can do it. If there's been an idea in mind, then I'm sure there's something that you're supposed to write and bring out to the world.
You can tell just by listening to Kalee that she is very passionate about the subject and she is so fun to talk to about it. You can tell it's close to her heart. So I, for one, am very happy that those other voices didn't take over. That bad grade in English didn't have the final say, and she actually did sit down to write this book because, sometimes it's hard. You think, well, should I be listening to these voices that are saying I shouldn't do this, or should I not? I mean, should I listen to what my gut is telling me, or what this story that really seems to want to come out of me is telling me? And I think it can be a hard choice. So I'm glad that she decided to write the book and that there's a second one coming. Did I just give a spoiler? I don't know. I don't remember where that came in the conversation, but there's a second one coming, which I'm very happy about. So let's go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, Kalee's advice for someone who also thinks they have a story, but maybe they're hearing those same voices that Kalee was hearing. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Kalee Boisvert. We are talking about MoneyWise Mabel's Bursting Bank, and all things money, talking to children about money, etc. Before the break, Kalee was talking about kind of the maybe circuitous path that it took to get her to write this book. So let's go ahead and return now to that conversation with Kalee. From your own experience, would that maybe be your advice to someone who wants to write, maybe get a writing coach or a writing partner? What would you say to someone?
Yeah, you're right. Like that is a good piece of advice, I would say. It worked really well for me. I think it probably just depends on like your personality type. Like you write like as an author and loving books, I've always like read about the authors too. Like I love reading their acknowledgement sections or just getting to understand like the process. And some of them like go into almost like some sort of like writing retreat, or they like go away to a special writing spot and just like go at it for like weeks or whatever it is, or days. And to me, that sounds like horrible. Like I don't know. I can't sit still for that long. Yeah. So for me, it was just like finding what works for me. So you're right. It was like finding a coach, because it was someone that I had like a deadline. I had to get her a certain amount of pages and work by a certain date. And right. That works for me. I'm very academic. So I'm like, oh, I have, an assignment due essentially. So find what works for you. If that's not their approach, maybe it's something else, but you can create almost like a system or something to help support you, because it is hard, I would say, to like stay on track at times, because it's a long process and you can't, you don't see the end result right away at all. So it sometimes feels like you're putting all this time and energy and you don't know, like, is it even going to work, or how long is this going to take? It's definitely, it's it's a really, learning experience of like perseverance and patience and all sorts of things you learn about yourself. So it's an amazing experience. But yeah, I would say it's probably different for everyone and their personality type. So give yourself grace and find things that would support you. Like, how do you work well in daily life? And try to incorporate that into your writing schedule or your writing process.
Yeah. When you do sneak in those moments to read just for you, what are your go-to genres and some of your favorite authors?
So I love thrillers. You were saying before, you've interviewed a lot of thrillers lately. I love thrillers. I don't know what that is. It's a big escape from what I do the day to day, I think. So I love, like, I've read all like the Frida McFadden, Lucinda Berry, those ones. But I also love just like historical like fiction, or just like those like long stories through someone's life. And so I read all of like Kristen Hanna's book. I just read The Women recently. Amazing. Just brilliant. Like work like that. You're just like, how long did this take you to write? Like the level of details, and just blown away. And then I do really love nonfiction as well. And so I read like, a lot of like spirituality, self-help, like Wayne Dyer and Gabby Bernstein and things like that. So I'm always into like trying to test something new too, like with variety for type of books. So it's not always thrillers, because then I get a little bit too spooked out. I'm like looking under my bed at night and stuff. I'm like, oh, lay off the thrillers. Let's move to some love stories.
Right. You have a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old. What are they reading?
Oh, so my daughter says she hates books. That is really hard for me to hear.
Yes.
Like, you're not my child. So she likes those almost like graphic novels where it's like there's like a picture and almost more like comic book based. And then Jack's my little guy. He actually really likes books, but his attention span is like boo. So like he'll bring all the books to you and you start reading them, and you'll get like a page or two there and then a page or two there. And he likes that book about like don't push the button or whatever, of course, because he likes being naughty. And so you're saying like don't push the button, and he's like the page. He just loves it. He's like getting to test his little naughty skills. So I'm like, I think I see like a book kid in him, because he does seem to like the books. Yeah. And Ivy, I'm gonna turn her into a reader. I'm like, you just gotta find the thing you love, and once you find the one that pulls you in, I'm like, you're hooked.
Yep. For my brother, it was encyclopedias. He started reading encyclopedias and he never went back. I mean, most kids don't even know what an encyclopedia is nowadays, but as long as she's reading graphic novels, hey, at least she's doing something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I agree. But I mean, she doesn't love the bookstore as much as me. It's luckily that like bookstores sell like accessories and pencils and erasers and stuff like that, because that gets her in.
Right. Yeah.
Not the books.
No, that's heartbreaking.
I know.
In terms of, if people want to know more about you and the book and the upcoming book, website if you have one, and any social media that you're active on.
Yeah, so usually just under my name, Kalee Boisvert. My website is kaleeboisvert.com. So it's KALEEBOIS, V as in Victor, ERT. So kind of hard spelling, but hopefully you can stumble upon it. And same thing, like Instagram, Kalee Boisvert. So they're all basically as of my name, but you can find me there. And like reach out on my website. It has a contact form if you have any questions or anything. I love hearing from people, and I love hearing like people's feedback on the book. So if you read MoneyWise Mabel and you want to share what you thought, mostly nice, please.
Yes.
Let's keep it friendly.
Right. At least keep it. Yes. If you didn't like something, there's ways of saying that are perfectly lovely.
Yeah.
Kalee, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure that we covered or highlighted?
I don't think so. No, this was really fun. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your weekend to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening in.
Thank you again to Kalee for talking to me about Mabel being MoneyWise and her bursting bank. This is, as I said, it's a great resource if you want to talk to children about money. If you have younger children and you want to start them early, there's all kinds of resources out there. But this is definitely a good place to start, because the pictures are fun and bright, and it's a story that kind of walks you through the process. Everybody's process might be a little bit different in terms of how their bank works, but walks you through the process of going to the bank with your child, opening an account, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of fun, and I would recommend, if you are looking for a conversation starter with a child to talk about money, this would be a good place to start. So thank you to Kalee for joining me to talk about MoneyWise Mabel and her bursting bank. Thank you, of course, to you for joining us for this conversation. I hope that you will also join me for the next episode. I will be also doing a children's book. I'm very excited about 2 weeks in a row doing children's books. This one is Colossal Words for Kids by Colette Hiller. It's 75 words, and I love vocabulary. So I am so excited to talk about to talk to Colette, and maybe we can be total nerds together about the words that we love. I have so many words that I just love the way they sound, or even what they mean. So I'm looking forward to that for next week's episode. I hope that you will join me for that episode, of course. And as we wrap this episode up, as always, thank you so much for your support. If you have not done so already, please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. That way you always know when there are new episodes. It also helps the algorithm so much. If you could also leave a positive review, that helps more than you can know. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be one sentence, but a positive review really goes a long way to helping support this podcast. So thank you in advance, or in retrospect if you've already done any of those things. Greatly appreciated. You can find the podcast on social media as well: Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. And I love hearing from people who have listened to the conversations and maybe have read the authors that I have spoken to and want to have conversations about that. Please come find the podcast on social media. You will, of course, find me as well, because I am the host of the podcast. So it's not under my name. It's GSMC Book Review Podcast, of course, but find the podcast and come ask me random questions. I'm always nosy, wanting to know what everyone else is reading. Come be nosy and ask me questions. I would be happy to engage in those conversations with you. I hope that you're having a great day. I hope that your week is off to a great start, but mostly I hope that whatever's going on in your life right now, you have plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to